Broncos rookie tight end Greg Dulcich adds a little bit of a wrinkle into the Broncos offensive rotation. How does it impact players like Albert Okwuegbunam, Eric Saubert, and Eric Tomlinson inside the Broncos offense? Plus, who starts at cornerback opposite of Patrick Surtain on Monday Night Football? And we highlight Alex Singleton, who's been a surprise addition so far for the Broncos this season. You get that and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts in audio format, or whether you watch us on YouTube. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button down below so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, Sayre, Bedinger, site expert, predominantly orange.com. Sayre, my friend, it's great to see you again. I know that you just moved into your brand new house. Excited to see what you come up with your backdrop. Surprisingly enough, a lot of Broncos fans were complaining throughout the year about, oh, what's up with Sayre's background? But now that it's gone, people are saying that they miss it now. So it's crazy how things work, my friend. But it's great to see you. We've got a lot to talk about here as the Broncos put in the final finishing touches on their game preparation for the Los Angeles Chargers.
I'm looking forward to the game, Cody. I'm looking forward to post-game shows with, changing up this backdrop, whatever I got. I was just telling you before we recorded, I'm just throwing a bunch of my favorite stuff behind me right now. Obviously, I love shoes. I love hats, Cody. I got a couple of Star Wars things that you can't really see, but I do also have a white tarp over here on the other side. If you got to give the people what they want. Look, if they want the white tarp back, I've got one on the other side of this room down here. But no, I'm excited. I'm excited to watch the Broncos. Hopefully will christen this new house with a victory, do it the right way on Monday Night Football for the Denver Broncos. And of course, going into this game, we've been talking about this all week, a lot of players coming back from injury. I know the injuries have been kind of the news at the forefront of the news for the Denver Broncos in a negative sense, but this game against the Chargers could also bring a lot of good news on the injury front for the Broncos. So we'll kind of see what happens here.
Well, and one thing as well, the Broncos, they'll put in the finishing touches. They practice Friday afternoon, they'll practice Saturday morning, and then they'll fly out Sunday to Los Angeles. I'll be flying out on Sunday to LA as well to cover the game. I know you and I will do a post-game report immediately following the show once I get back to my hotel room. But, let's talk about the Broncos offense right now. Let's talk about Greg Dulcich, right? You mentioned some reinforcements potentially coming forth on Monday Night Football. Greg Dulcich, I think for him being fully healthy right now, I think his return kind of signifies a little bit of a changing of the guard inside the tight end room. Like, will the Broncos offense utilize the tight ends a little bit more so than they have with Dulcich? And I can tell you this there, being at practice, watching Dulcich on the field, he moves so fast. He's so crisp. And the way that he moves about as well, when he catches a pass, looks it in, brings it in, and he gets upfield with a burst, everything looks so smooth to him. Not to mention, he's got Courtland Sutton size, man. So he really changes things, I think, if you insert him into the offense at some point.
He really does change a lot, I think. I mean, just looking back and thinking back to what Nathaniel Hackett said in the Behind the Broncos episode where he's talking about he brings something that we don't have to the offense. Well, we're hopefully going to finally get to see what exactly that something is. And maybe it's just the fact that a simple dynamic presence at the position. I think a lot of people overrated that Albert Okwuegbunam could just kind of step into the tight end one role and immediately become that guy. Obviously, things have not worked out that way. So with Greg Dulcich coming into the fold and potentially, being a key piece of the offense right away, I think that could be a little overstated, but at the same time, is it? Because the Broncos need an injection of something right now in the offense, and perhaps Dulcich could be the guy to bring it. You and I were talking before the show, what does this mean for Albert Okwuegbunam? Because it's not like we've seen a very clear and defined role for him. It almost feels like the Broncos have been slowly but surely phasing him out of their game plan, it'll be interesting to see if they insert Dulcich into a role that we haven't quite yet seen from any of these guys, because it's been a committee approach at tight end so far in 2022.
And I think that's the biggest question. I don't think necessarily the Broncos not utilizing Albert Okwuegbunam the last couple of weeks is anything more so than I think some of the trends that have been created. Like if you look at the Broncos, when Albert O has been in, like the snaps he's been on, he's only been in on 2 run snaps the entire season. He's been in on 45 passing attempts as well. So it's almost like when Albert O is on the field, the Broncos are passing. So part of it, I mean, that's also on coaching. Coaches have to find a way to get creative. And we all know this too, and we've been on record of saying it. Albert O even knows this himself. He's just got to be a little bit more of a disciplined and committed blocker in a sense than what he has been throughout his career, but that's necessarily not his strength. His strength is getting across the field, getting across the middle, and being a yards after the catch guy. Well, that's also how Greg Dulcich is right now, so I'll be very, very intrigued, Sayre, to see maybe what we see a little bit of Greg Dulcich. Do we see him on Monday night? I think there's a real legitimate possibility we do, but how will this impact in a game situation the other tight end usage? Guys like Eric Saubert, who's emerged as the number 1 tight end and a reliable target that Russell Wilson likes to go to here early on in the season. Tight end right now is a very, very interesting position, and if they do use him against LA, I'll be very intrigued to see where they line him up, who they match him up against, or who they try to isolate him on against. Because, like I said, Sayre, you can see his speed on the football field during practice. He has something right now that the Broncos don't consistently have enough of.
Exactly, and they need so much more of that. Even like we talked about when he was drafted, you draft a guy like Greg Dulcich to make an impact in your passing game. You can't necessarily expect him to go out there and be George Kittle or Rob Gronkowski as a blocker right away. But where could he excel as a blocker? Maybe as a big slot. And I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen more of that from Albert O as the Broncos try to develop their outside running game, more of him blocking as a big slot. I know that they want him to be the all-around inline guy. Are they going to expect the same right away out of Greg Dulcich? It's going to be interesting to see, because Cody, I think if he has a lot of success early on running these routes over the middle of the field, gaining yards after the catch, I think a lot of people are going to wonder, well, why didn't the Broncos do that with Albert Okwuegbunam? And why are they just now adding that wrinkle into the offense? And I think that would be, like you said, I mean, it's on the coaching to figure out how to make sure you can best utilize these guys. It would be a fair critique, I think, of the coaching staff to wonder that. At the same time, it's kind of like with winning. You don't really care how you get it done. You just care that it gets done, right? So if Greg Dulcich is bringing something to the offense that the Broncos didn't have before, like Nathaniel Hackett said that he could, I think that's all we need as far as getting back on track on that side of the ball.
Well, I think one thing too, the Broncos' struggles on first down have been noted. You know how you avoid going backwards on first down? Go a quick pass, run a quick hook or a curl route with Greg Dulcich. Okay, hey, 2nd and 5, a little bit more manageable. We'll see what the Broncos decide to do on Monday Night Football, but it's going to be a big primetime matchup that we look forward to breaking down here on the Locked On Broncos podcast. But Broncos country coming up here in just one moment. Sayre and I, we're going to dive deep into the Broncos cornerback position. Who's going to start opposite of Patrick Surtain? Will it be rookie cornerback Damarri Mathis, or will it be the third-year veteran player now, and Michael Ojemudia, who's coming off of injured reserve? We'll dive into that coming up here in just a moment. But before we get into that, let me tell you about LinkedIn, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. In these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's super easy to create a job on LinkedIn Jobs, and when you do that, you can add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. They have simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. And it's always about finishing the year strong as we get into the fourth quarter of the working year, and you want to make sure you have the right team member to help you do just that. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors, and LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We all know on Monday Night Football, Mike Williams and Patrick Surtain are going to be key highlighted matchups that everybody needs to have their eye on, especially in primetime action. We've seen Patrick Surtain match up against Devontae Adams and other top wide receivers throughout his career in the NFL. How's it going to fare there? But now, with Ronald Darby's injury, who steps up at cornerback opposite of Surtain? Thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day. Sayre, this is a huge question right now in Broncos Country as to who starts opposite of Patrick Surtain at the cornerback position after Ronald Darby suffered a torn ACL. He'll have surgery soon. And I think the biggest thing when we look at the cornerback position, right? Who do you match up on? Because when we looked at the Chargers matchup last year, you had Darby, you had Surtain. Darby played a lot of time on Mike Williams last year, and Surtain matched up against Keenan Allen. But we know that Keenan Allen likes to move around quite a bit, so that does present a challenge. So I think I have to present this to you, and I'm eager for your thoughts on this. Do you live with having Patrick Surtain on Mike Williams the entire game and live with maybe having, K'Wan Williams and the safeties cover and funnel a guy like Keenan Allen inside the slot or over the top? I mean, what is the best matchup right here? Because one of these guys, Damarri Mathis or Michael Ojemudia, will have to step up.
I do feel like what you just described, Cody, is going to be the best matchup here because, look, everybody that's listening knows the Broncos have been the best pass defense in the NFL this year. I think in terms of just shutting receivers down, shutting other teams down in that department, really tightening up and clamping up in the red zone. I think they have been the best pass defense. Ronald Darby was obviously a huge part of that, but I think the lineup that you just mentioned, Pat Surtain probably playing the majority of his snaps against Mike Williams, and then having K'Wan Williams we know Keenan Allen likes to work out of the slot quite a bit. I think K'Wan Williams is having a really underrated season. So that could be a matchup that works out for all parties involved on the Denver side, right? And then Damarri Mathis and Michael Ojemudia, maybe you ride the hot hand, kind of like we talked about at the running back position. You ride with the hot hand. If the guy that goes out there and starts, if it's Damarri Mathis, if he starts struggling, say, all right, let's give Ojemudia a shot and see if he can go out there. Not that you want to just derail his confidence at all, but I think at the same time, you got to go with what's working. And so we'll see kind of how fresh Ojemudia is coming back from this injury. Damarri Mathis has shown some things, Cody. He's been really quick. He's been playing aggressive. And I think when he's able to do that, he's able to really play to his strengths, right? I mean, we saw all the athleticism in the pre-draft process, the 43.5-inch vertical, the sub 4.4 and the 40-yard dash. The tools are all there. The aggressiveness is there. Now it's just a matter of, hey, can he go out there and make some plays on the ball? Because I feel like on a couple of opportunities that he's had, he's been just a fraction of a second behind or a fraction of a second late. But at the same time, he's been in pretty good position. So it's going to be one of those things that I think the Broncos maybe have to kind of put some faith, in Damarri Mathis because Ojemudia is coming in a little cold.
Well, and that's the thing too, because I even asked Michael Ojemudia in the locker room on Thursday, I said, hey, how do you kind of get back in the mindset? You're back on the practice field, but how do you translate all the mental reps into the physical game sense? He's like, a lot of it is it's going to have to be getting back into like football shape. Like he's been running, he's been doing all this stuff. But when we talk about being in a game with how fast it is, start, stop, being able to get back in that rhythm is something I think the Broncos are eager to see, maybe how he responds this upcoming week on Monday Night Football. I also wouldn't be surprised as well because right now Damarri Mathis is dealing with a knee injury. He was limited in Thursday's practice. It was just something he sustained. It was very noticeable as well. During the Thursday night game against the Colts, it just seemed like he was covering a crossing pattern. He went to go make a play with ball side hand. It looked like his leg. He went down on the ground, bounced right up, was kind of grabbing onto his knee, but he stayed in the game. He finished, and we'll see what the move is from there. But he's very confident as well. He met with the media on Thursday inside the locker room, and he said he's eager to learn and take things in stride. And you know what? I think if you're Christian Parker, you have two guys you can rotate in. There's also a veteran guy that's not being talked about, and Darius Phillips, that is also coming off of the hamstring injury. He could maybe play a role inside the rotation as well. So I think that'll be a huge storyline for us to follow here leading up to kickoff is what the Broncos cornerback unit looks like. And even in Monday Night Football, who does get the start opposite of Patrick Surtain? For me personally, Sayre, I'm kind of the mindset you can figure out based on personnel, right? What's going to matter? Who can step up at this point? Because you mentioned it. Ronald Darby was a huge part in the Broncos' success last year against the Chargers. Not only just Patrick Surtain, right? Because Justin Herbert threw those 2 interceptions to Surtain last year. He had the pick six, and he had the one where he tried to find, I believe, who was the tight end? It was Jared Cook in the back corner of the end zone, and Surtain was lurking underneath and found it. But often at times in those games, Mike Williams was being covered by Ronald Darby. And I thought Darby, he had a couple of good pass breakups, and then they called an offensive PI on Mike Williams, and then later in that game they called PI against Ronald Darby. It was a good battle between those two. You hate to lose a guy like Darby, but in the NFL it is a next man up mentality, and I'll be very, very curious to see if Damarri Mathis or Michael Ojemudia take the torch and run with it. And if that's the case and both these guys are playing good, the Broncos have a good problem, and that's good depth that can contribute, especially with some of the receiving threats that they're going to face a little bit down the road.
Yes, and they need that depth all throughout the season, right? You've already lost one of your best guys. You've already also lost one of your best guys at safety in Justin Simmons. So the Broncos are finding out what that next man up mentality looks like really quickly. And to have good depth is critical over the course of a season. Not to mention, this kind of a situation can set you up really great for the future because, of course, you don't want to see a guy like Ronald Darby get injured. But speaking from like a general manager's perspective, if a player like Damarri Mathis can go out there and prove that he's worthy of being a full-time starter, now you have a full-time starter at a premium position on a rookie contract for the next 3 years beyond this season. That puts you in really great position to be able to build the rest of your roster. So I think the Broncos have a good situation on their hands given the circumstance.
And you know what? There's also another position as well where this same principle has applied to the Broncos this season, and that is Alex Singleton proving to be a reliable option for the Broncos, not only on defense, but on special teams. So we'll talk about his impact. We'll talk about the latest on Josey Jewell coming up here in just a moment, Broncos country. But before we do that, let me tell you about BetOnline.net, the sponsor of today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, in-depth articles, and analysis on every game that you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. They're the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MMA, boxing, golf, and all your MLB action as well here in the postseason. So head to BetOnline.net or use your mobile device to learn more today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Earlier in the offseason, when the Broncos signed Alex Singleton at the inside linebacker position, it was met with a lot of skepticism, including from myself being very open about that as to, was this the right move for the Broncos to make? So far this season, Alex Singleton has proven his value to the Denver Broncos. Thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in and making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day. Sayre, come free agency, once this was one of those moves, I think it was their first move that they made in free agency, bringing in Alex Singleton. And I remember you and I were like, is this the move that they're going to make, right? Because we didn't have any information at the top of our heads that they were going to move Baron Browning to edge rusher, things like that. And we were wondering, is Jonas Griffith going to be the guy that they bring back to the forefront? How does it impact, the free agency status of Josey Jewell, right? There were a lot of questions when the Alex Singleton signing initially happened. But I can tell you this, I've been very impressed. He's probably been one of the most surprising free agent additions outside of the guys like K1 and DJ Jones. Alex Singleton has definitely deserved some praise and respect from Broncos country because on defense, he's flying around at 100 million miles an hour doing his job, and he's being very valuable to it, contrary to the people like, oh, he's covering guys. It's not his responsibility to cover tight ends or receivers, but he's done a really good job helping out in pass coverage in the middle hook zone. And then against the run, he's just a piss missile, man. He is all over the place. I've been very impressed here with Alex Singleton, and it appears he'll probably have to be leaned on heavily against the Chargers on Monday Night Football.
And I think for a lot of Broncos fans, that would have made people very nervous going into week one. Like I did, actually. Remember, it was Jonas Griffith and Alex Singleton at that time. Josey Jewell. This is his second injury this season that he's had to deal with. First the calf, now the knee. So I think before it would have made a lot of people nervous. Now it's kind of like, well, I think it's business as usual, right? I mean, he's out there. He's got 26 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a couple of passes defensed. So, I mean, it's not like he's out there just filling space or, when the Broncos need an 11th guy, they're like, hey, who could we call on in this situation? Let's throw Alex Singleton out there. No, he's actually making a difference. He made some big plays against the Colts as well. Even after a penalty that was called on him, he came back and responded with that. He busted up that screenplay that they tried to run. Just a really nice play. And speaking to what you said about playing fast and playing aggressive, that's where we've seen him do his best work. I mean, attacking the line of scrimmage, playing fast, playing aggressive. He's also done a good job on special teams when he's been asked to go out there and do that. I know he doesn't have a ton of snaps there over the last 3 games, more so than the first 2. So if he's starting here, we may see less special teams work for him, but he's done a good job, Cody. I mean, really, honestly, 2 TFLs that he has this season, they both came in that game against the Colts where he was playing in relief of Josie Jewell, and he still had 9 tackles. So, I mean, he's definitely a guy that I think the Broncos can more so rely on than dread having out there on the field. And you don't want any linebackers in coverage on guys like Deebo Samuel, or you don't want that's an offensive coordinator, like you pointed out, Cody. That's an offensive coordinator doing a great job of playing the chess match and creating those matchups on the field where you can get a linebacker matched up on a guy like Deebo Samuel, or in this case, I mean, against like an Austin Eckler. So that's going to be the huge test for Alex Singleton in this game is if you're asked to, to run a wheel route with Alex or Austin Eckler up the sideline, can you do it? Or if you have to cover an arrow route over the middle of the field against Austin Eckler, can you do it? Obviously, the Broncos need to be getting more of their safeties involved in that regard as well. But Singleton, to me, he's proven himself worthy enough to not be dreading the fact that he's going to play a lot in this game.
One thing we've seen the Chargers do a lot of this season, they love their running back screen. They love to let pressure upfield, dump it off to Eckler, and let him do the rest. I think this is where we're going to see those fast instincts from Alex Singleton play off. I mean, to be honest with you, like it's a team game. It's 11 on 11. But I think that we talk about Patrick Surtain and Mike Williams. I feel like Alex Singleton, aligning, and Jonas Griffith aligning a little bit out of the backfield against a guy like Austin Eckler if he comes across face. They have to account for that. This is going to be a very pivotal matchup for the inside linebackers against Eckler, who's coming off of a nearly 200 all-purpose yard game this past week against the Cleveland Browns. But I would say I have been blown away by how good Alex Singleton has been early on for the Broncos. And if there's anybody that doesn't think he's been good, I respectfully encourage you to get your eyes checked, learn a little bit about the scheme. I've done some film breakdowns, or there's this guy on Twitter that's done some film breakdowns at DB Film Study on Twitter. Make sure you follow that so you see a little bit about what's going on with Alex Singleton and the Denver Broncos defense. But one thing you can guarantee is you're going to get an episode here, Locked On Broncos, every single day, all year long, because for Broncos Country, this is your go-to for the best objective coverage of all things Denver Broncos news, content, coverage related. The Broncos back on the practice field on Friday. We'll hear from the coordinators as well, and then they'll also practice on Saturday. So you know what that means. You can expect some bonus content courtesy of Sayre Bedinger and myself here on Locked On Broncos. With that said, Broncos Country, thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Sayre Bedinger and myself will be back tomorrow for a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.